Hey booktube! My name is the Book Mage and welcome to my channel. So today is going to be a bit of a different kind of video. I guess you could still say that this is technically a haul video, but we are nearing the season of Christmas. It is a time for giving, even though I bought all these in early November. And so today I'm going to be showing you books that I have bought specifically as a gift for my mum. So my mum does like to read, and she is, I guess, the person to credit with getting me into reading, because she spent like basically every night of my childhood sat by my bed reading something to me, and I have really fond memories of that. But obviously my mum doesn't read to me anymore. So as you can see, I tend to be quite the book collector. I like to read a lot, and my mum has read a lot some years and then less other years, and there have been a lot of times when we've been reading the same book. She's borrowed a few off my shelves, but for the most part we do tend to have kind of a difference in reading taste. Like there's like an overlap, but I just don't think she'd like a lot of like the seriously grimdark stuff that I read. That, and I tend to keep my books in pristine condition, and my mom does not. So while she has been asking me for things to read and suggestions of things to read, I just decided that rather than go through the whole pain of like trying to recommend something and then trying to avoid mentioning that it may or may not be on my shelf, I thought I would just go ahead and buy her a bunch of books that I thought she would like and get her her own copies so that she can do whatever she wants with them, and hopefully she will enjoy some of my recommendations. It would be really bad if she didn't like any of these books. So I picked up 7 books that I thought my mum would like, some of which I do already have on my shelves, but I'm gonna haul them for you now anyway. I feel awkward hauling books that aren't for me, but that's what we're gonna do. And maybe if your mum is like mine, maybe a Christmas gift. Some ideas, just saying. So the kind of books that I know my mum has read and enjoyed include the Harry Potter series, The Lord of the Rings, The Hunger Games. She really liked Outsider by Claire de Lys, The Queen of the Tearling, and they're all like the sort of fantasy YA kind of ones that I know, but she has also read a fair amount of contemporary. I feel like she tends to read like a lot of like quaint British wartime novels and like other like military stuff as well. Oh, and she was also a really big fan of Kathy Reichs, who I think she wrote the books that became like the Bones TV show. So she's got some pretty wide tastes, I think. Just not super grimdark. So the first book that I bought for my mum was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. The reason that this is in the haul is because I actually did buy her a copy of this book already, and she lost it before she'd read it. My mum's one of those mums that likes to tidy relentlessly, and she tidied so well that she tidied the book out of existence. So here's her second chance to read it. So if you don't know what Carry On is about, essentially it's kind of like a Harry Potter style story where the magical hero is already in his final year of school. He's already done like all the Chosen One stuff all the way through his high school, and this is set up as though it's kind of like the last book in the series. He's been facing off against this magical enemy known as the Humdrum, and it is like sucking pockets of magic away from the world, which is really bad if you're a wizard. And he also obsesses over the fact that he thinks that his roommate is in fact a vampire. Essentially it's kind of like a fun play on Harry Potter if it was like styled a bit like a fanfiction, and it's just a really easygoing, fun kind of, I don't know, like YA magical adventure story. It reads a lot like a contemporary, but there is magic in it. I feel like most people on BookTube already know about this book and maybe have already read this book. I really enjoyed this one. When I read it, I flew through it in like a day and a half. And I know my mum loves Harry Potter. Like, she knows that world, she knows that realm pretty well, so I feel like this is like a good way to ease her back into like a fantasy setting, because she's very familiar with the sort of like narrative setup of like this kind of story. It's also not too taxing on the details. I feel like she gets a bit stressed when there's like a lot of fantasy things to remember, which I don't know how she managed to read her way through like the Silmarillion, but she did. But apparently she doesn't have the energy for that anymore, so turning it down a bit. I feel like she would really enjoy this one. It's just a lot of fun, and it's nice and easygoing, and it's a nice fun story. So hopefully she doesn't lose this one. The next book that I bought for my mum was The Fountains of Silence by Ruta Sepetys. So I know my mum does like historical fiction. I know for the longest time she was watching like this kind of slightly comedic historical drama thing that was on TV, but I have no idea what it was called, and this kind of gave me like the same sort of vibes in terms of like the setting. And obviously this book has been like really hyped up by BookTube, so even though it's not one that I have read and it's not one that I think I'm ever going to read, given the amount of like good feedback this book has got, I feel like she'll probably like it. So I don't know very much about this book, but I believe it's set in Madrid during like a time of political upheaval. I think there is an American, maybe, that has come over to Madrid, and there is also a young girl who works in a hotel, and I think they're trying to either uncover some sort of mystery or like solve some sort of problem. I realize that like every book you kind of tried to solve a problem, but you know what I mean. I don't really know much about what this book is about. I'm pretty sure that there's like a romance heavily featured in here as well, and I've just heard really good things about it, and I feel like it has that kind of like gorgeous historical vibe that I think she will really enjoy. The next book I bought for my mum is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. I think I'm pronouncing that right. This is like a wartime novel, and as I've said, my mum is really interested in the war. She likes a lot of like military fiction, mainly to do specifically with like the First and Second World War. And this one is a New York Times bestseller and winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, so she'd better like it. From what I understand, this story is set in Paris, and I think it follows a young blind girl and a boy who is like part of like the Hitler Youth or something like that. I'm not sure exactly like what the plot is, and I'm not sure if it's exactly the kind of book she would pick up for herself, but I think it is a story that when she reads it she will enjoy. I think it has a lot of the things that she probably likes in fiction. I'm hoping it's one that she'll like. Next in my little gift haul is a book I have read, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Oh my god, my heart, you know how much I love this book. This is one of my top 5 favourite books of all time, and one of only 3 5-star reads that I've read this whole year so far. So I really like this book. This is a retelling of a Greek classical myth, specifically the mythos of Achilles and his friend Patroclus, whereas in this version they're actually romantic lovers. So I read this during the summer and I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. The writing in here is really, really beautiful, and it tells such like just a fantastical, really touching, moving story, and I loved it. I loved every second of this book. My mum did actually read all of the Greek classics that I used to bring home from class when I was studying classics in my 6th form. So I think she read the Odyssey, the Iliad, possibly 1 or 2 of the plays. So I know that she definitely did enjoy those, and she also has like a good knowledge base for going into this. I feel like this could be like a nice fresh return to some stories that she's already familiar with. Kind of a bit like Carry On actually. I think I'm just giving my mum like a lot of gay rewrites. And yeah, I'm really hoping that she loves this one as much as I did, because like it's just one of my favourites of all time now, I think. Hopefully she will share my very intense feelings. Next on the list of books that I'm going to give to my mum, I caved a little bit with the booktube peer pressure, and so even though I'm never going to read this book, I think from what has been said by a lot of other booktubers, I think my mum will like it. And that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm not even sure that I need to talk about this book and say what it's about. I feel like everyone on booktube has either read this, reviewed it, or like has heard somebody else do the same, knows what it's about. Just in case. From my knowledge just of other reviews and not looking at the back, I'm pretty sure that this follows like an aging Hollywood starlet. She's been like reclusive for many years, and then one day out of nowhere she contacts, I think, a young like newspaper or tabloid writer to come and tell like the story of her life and publish it. She's sort of recounting like her glory days, and she's going through like the 7 husbands that she had and which one of them was her true love, and I think that's kind of the gist of it. It's been drilled into my head the amount of times I've seen people talk about this book. Yeah, so this is clearly not my taste in books. I feel like maybe I would potentially watch this as a movie, but I feel like in book form it's just not the kind of thing that I tend to pick up, you know? There's like one too few dragons in this book. I feel like of all the books here, this one is also the least into my mum's taste. She's not like a huge fan of like Hollywood glamour and starlets and that sort of thing, and I feel like she might be a little bit reluctant to pick this up, but the reason that I'm giving it to her is mainly because of all like the glowing praise that YouTube has just like heaped upon this book. Everyone's always saying that it's like one of the best books they've ever read. I'm like, do you know, it's not going to be for me. I already know it's not, but maybe my mum will really like it. At the end of the day, it's quite short, you know, it's a story, and I feel like if she actually would sit down and read it, I feel like she might enjoy it. So yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say about this, but yeah, if it turns out that my mum doesn't like this, then I'm pretty sure she'll give it to her sister, who I know will definitely like this. Next up is another book that is very like near and dear to my heart, and that is The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. This book is like criminally overlooked in like the booktube fantasy world. I read this for Medievalathon earlier this year, and it's honestly one of the best books I've ever read. I just really love it. I should like try and tell you what it's about. So this book is a fantasy, and styled more like a classic like political kind of fantasy. There are like vague hints of magic and there's like a lot of like theology in this, but for the most part it's mostly kind of like a human story. So this follows a man named Kazaril as he is making his way back home from the war. He'd previously been quite high ranking, but he was sold to the enemy and managed to survive several years as a galley slave before he escaped, and now he's like making his way back to the, I guess like the palace where he served as a squire when he was a boy. He's just kind of looking for work. His body is like very worn and torn by this point, so he's not really the kind of swordsman that he used to be. He's maybe just hoping that they'll hire him as a cook or something. But when he gets there, the lady of the castle remembers him and she hires him to be the tutor to her granddaughter, who is the sister to the heir to the throne. And it brings about this fantastic dynamic of like this kind of older, like world-weary man trying to tutor like two young sassy upstart girls who he's trying to make into ladies, but they're both a bit like, actually, why don't we do things this way? And I really love them as characters as well. They're fantastic. The main character is honestly just like the sweetest old man, and he's not even that old. He's like middle-aged, but his body is broken, so like he feels older than he really is. And he's just one of my new favourite characters of all time, and a lot of this book is caught up in like the theology of this world and also this like constant politicking for the throne. And I really love all the characters in this, like the two young women as well. They're just fantastic, and I really love the world that Lois McMaster Bujold crafts like in this story. So I feel like this is a really easy like fantasy to get into, especially for somebody like my mum who maybe isn't here to read about like a million pages of like history and lore and things. This is much more like direct and straightforward than that, and it is very character based. Like if I didn't care about the characters then I wouldn't care about the story, but luckily I really do care about the characters just so much. And she did enjoy watching Game of Thrones, and while this is nowhere near as like grimdark as Game of Thrones, that like political fantasy aspect is still there, so I feel like she'll really enjoy this one. And if she doesn't, I'm going to shout at her for a million years, because Kazaril is just like just my ultimate favourite character. Like I love him so much, and like everybody else needs to love him. Okay, and finally the last book that I bought for my mum is another booktube favourite, and that is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I feel like I don't really have to tell people this is the first book in a duology set in Leigh's Grishaverse series. I know there is sort of like debated reading order, or if you have to read everything else in the Grisha series to read this. I did read the original Grisha trilogy, it's back here on my shelf. I did read that before I went into Six of Crows, and if you're somebody like me that really cares about like background lore and the way like things tie in and like little mentions here and there, then I would definitely recommend doing that if you care about those things. But my mum does not. She does not have time to read through 3 books just to get to the good one. She does not have time to remember all these little tidbits of crap from those first 3 books, and she's not going to remember it coming into this book. She's not going to care, so I am just skipping her right ahead to the one that has all the good characters in it. If you maybe think that you're a little bit more like my mum, then just feel free to skip ahead. It's fine. You don't really miss out on a lot. There are a couple like repeat characters and like mentions of events past, but I don't feel like you have to have read the other ones to understand it or anything like that. It's just like a little nod to the readers that did read the initial trilogy, and like my mum doesn't have time for that, for the amount of gratification she will get from like reading those like 5 lines in there. I'm just gonna start her off straight at the crows. That is my decision to make, and I don't think she will care. So do I even have to say what this is about? In case you weren't aware, this is set in Leigh Bardugo's Grishaverse, which is like a magical land where there are like 3 different orders of mages, but they're called Grisha. And I always understood it that in this world magic is kind of like a science, so in the way that you understand like how the world works, like the science of how the world works and is put together, the better your understanding of your own magic. That's kind of my take on it. It's a Russian-inspired fantasy, although this one isn't set in the Russian-inspired world. This one is much more, it's kind of an amalgamation of like various parts in Europe, but like I feel like the biggest influence is places like Amsterdam. So again, I feel like this is another like really accessible, like easygoing kind of YA fantasy that my mum can really get into. Like it's got great plot and great characters, like especially the characters, and it's just like a really fun and fresh, unique feeling kind of world. So I feel like she'll definitely enjoy this, and I feel like it will stand out from like the other kind of more classic fantasy that she's read. I feel like this one has like the most like lore and background stuff that you need to get your head round. Like I'm hoping that she'll remember all of the different names of like the etherealky and the corporalky and so on. So fingers crossed. I just know that I really enjoyed this, and I know that she's read like some similar books to this, like that I enjoyed, that I passed on to her, so I'm hoping that she will also enjoy this one. It also then just means that like my mum can potentially start like booktube drama with whoever her favourite character is. Like, maybe I could convince her to start her own booktube and just talk about Six of Crows. So yeah, this is the 7th and final book that I decided to get her. Like, she better be grateful, because honestly, I actually really love this cover, like this paperback cover of Six of Crows, because, you know, it's different and it has like the shiny red text, and part of me is kind of like, I feel like maybe I also need to get myself the paperback copy because it's so pretty. So there we go, those were all these 7 books that I hauled today for my mum. I feel like I've got a pretty wide variety depending on like what kind of mood she's in or what kind of story she's after. So like hopefully she will read at least one of these. She'd better. And I have already given them to her. She hasn't picked any of them up yet, but I'm hoping that over Christmas time, maybe when she's got like some more free time like during the holidays, I'm hoping she will pick one of these up. And maybe I will just like pester her and I'll keep putting Six of Crows in her hand until like she actually starts reading it. So that was it for my little gift style book haul. Let me know what you thought of the books that I chose, especially for someone else. And do you have any suggestions for what maybe you think my mum might also like, based on like what I've told you about like her reading tastes and these books here? Because like, I'll buy her more books. I'll buy everyone books. Everyone needs more books. Except for me, because like my shelves are full. It's really awkward because you can't see the 2 boxes of books I've got sitting there for a different haul. And yeah, let me know in the comments down below, do you buy other people books as gifts? I feel like so many people today class like books as like a bad gift, kind of like getting socks, but I for one love both books and socks. Socks are like an A tier kind of gift and books are like an S tier gift. So I mean, feel free to fight me in the comments, but you're not gonna win. So yeah, I feel like that is it for this video. I don't really have anything else to talk about, so with that said, I am going to go. Hopefully you enjoyed this one, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!